Some other elements that we find in Gothic are demons and things stemming from the dark side. Whether it's someone being possessed, whether it's the actual demon in demon form, or whether it's just someone that's suspected to be a demon or associated with a demon. In other words, the dark side is very present here. Time, what we usually find in a Gothic work is that whatever the evil is, or whatever the darkness is, or the seemingly supernatural, or the actual supernatural, much of the tale takes place at night, at the witching hour, midnight. And of course, magic is involved. Sometimes it's white magic, which is usually associated with religion. Or there's black magic, which is usually associated with Satanism and demons, which is also associated in this case with Christianity. However, works like Gothic focus on the Islam tradition, so it's not focusing just on Christianity. We have to take a look at some of the plots, some of the common themes here: the skeleton in the closet, the secrets, claustrophobia, revenge tales, curses or ancestral curses, vampires again. Dreams and nightmares play a huge role, transformation and grotesque. And then the form of Gothic is typically a found manuscript or a found diary. It's rarely just someone telling us a story. Kind of like the legend of Sleepy Hollow, and even the Castle of Otranto. These are all found manuscripts that are being presented to us by the author. And within these works, we do find a lot of first-person narration, and we always have to question that in the form of the unreliable narrator. Some other conventions that we find, to focus on them a little more closely, the grotesque. The grotesque can fall into two categories, the physical and the mental. Grotesque itself is simply an abnormality, and if we're taking a look at physical grotesque, then we're looking at a physical abnormality, like the Elephant Man, or someone missing a limb. It can be great, or it can be very small. Any kind of physical abnormality falls under the grotesque. But we also find the mental grotesque. And this one's a little more dark, and we are getting into the psychological side of our characters here. So, if grotesque is an abnormality, then we know that a mental grotesque is some form of mental abnormality. Whether the person is schizophrenic or just completely psycho, we know that there's something wrong there. And in this case, it could simply be obsession. Somebody that's obsessed with a single thing, and they continue to push forward to reach some goal of this singular thing. In other words, tunnel vision, we would call that a mental grotesque. Some other elements: blood and paraphernalia of death. It's a bit more difficult to bring up art and nature and parallelism. In Gothic works, we will find a lot of descriptions of nature itself, as well as art found within a story. We always have to remember that those details of nature or art always parallel what's going on with the characters, or what's going on with the plot. So, if it's stormy outside, well, we know that there's something stormy going on with our characters as well. If a work of art is described as dark and gloomy, then we need to assume that what's going on with the characters is also very dark and very gloomy. Some other themes: immorality, immortality, and sexual repression. If we're looking at immorality, we don't have to go farther than looking at the Marquis de Sade. His tales of sexual exploitation and so forth really dig deep into the darker areas of sexuality and sadism, masochism, torture. Then we go to immortality, and we come back to our vampires, we come back to our werewolves, those supernatural creatures that we find in these works. And then, of course, sexual repression as a common theme, and again, we usually have our damsel in distress who is sexually repressed and trying to find some kind of an escape to be individual and independent, and unfortunately doesn't always succeed. And then finally, in this introduction, we're going to take a look at the sublime. The sublime is very difficult to understand because there's not a set definition for it. One way to look at the sublime is how the human responds to something that is absolutely magnificent. If you climb to the top of a mountain, for instance, and you get this vast view that is absolutely mind-boggling, beautiful. It really shows you as a human being just how small you are in the entire universe. That could be considered a sublime moment. If we are in a position where we see something that's supernatural, if we see a ghost, our response to that could very well be a sublime moment. The sublime itself is, again, something that is not completely well defined. It doesn't have a set definition. There are entire books written on the subject. Therefore, there are extra definitions given in Blackboard that you'll want to take a look at. But we will be focusing on how the human responds to supernatural and how the human responds to nature. And to finish this up, as Hemingway might say, that's just the tip of the iceberg. Please take a look at the files under the introductory information regarding this genre, and I hope you enjoy the class and its reading.